a racist police officer, David Miller, yelling aggressively over two young black twins, Aisha and Imani, who are forced to kneel on the pavement, the metallic clink of handcuffs echoing the tension. The twins' mother, Attorney General Lena Johnson, steps out, her presence a silent, powerful threat. The officer's face instantly Officer David Miller, a man whose tenure on the force had been marked by a profound sense of entitlement and a deep-seated, unchallenged prejudice. He patrolled these streets not to protect them, but to preserve the aesthetic of uniformity he believed they represented. His patrol car, a gleaming white Ford Interceptor, was a symbol of his authority, and today that authority was about to be exercised against a perceived anomaly. Walking along the sidewalk, their navy blazers crisp and their movements synchronized with the easy familiarity of a lifetime spent side by side, were Aisha and Imani Johnson. At 16, the twins possessed a quiet dignity that belied their age, a composure honed by years at St. Jude's Academy, the most prestigious private school in the state. They were discussing the upcoming debate competition, their voices low and focused, a pair of intellectual dynamos whose presence in this neighborhood was entirely unremarkable to anyone who knew them. To Officer Miller, however, they were an immediate, jarring disruption. He saw the dark skin, the expensive uniforms, and his mind, already primed by a lifetime of unchallenged bias, immediately conjured a narrative of suspicion. "They don't belong here," the thought echoed, a familiar corrosive whisper in his consciousness. "They're casing the place. No one walks in Crestwood unless they're up to no good." He executed a sharp U-turn, the sudden squeal of the tires a crude violation of the neighborhood's silence. He pulled up to the curb, the flashing blue and red lights of his cruiser reflecting momentarily in the polished leather of the twins' shoes. Miller killed the engine and stepped out, his posture immediately aggressive, his hand resting conspicuously on the butt of his service weapon. "Hold it right there," he barked, his voice amplified by the quiet street. "What are you two doing here?" Aisha, the more outwardly composed of the two, stopped and turned, her expression a mixture of confusion and practiced politeness. "Good afternoon, officer. We're just walking home from school. We live on Kensington Drive, just 2 blocks over." Imani remained silent, her gaze fixed on the officer, a subtle, almost imperceptible hardening in her eyes that Miller instantly misinterpreted as insolence. It was that look, a look of quiet, unyielding challenge, that ignited the fuse of his temper. "I didn't ask for your life story, girl. I asked what you're doing here," Miller spat, stepping closer. "There was a report of a suspicious person in the area, possibly involved in a package theft. I need to see some identification, and I need to see it now." He knew the report was flimsy, a generalized alert from a week ago, but it was the only pretext he needed. Aisha reached into her blazer pocket, her movements slow and deliberate. "We don't carry our school IDs when we walk, officer. But I can call our mother right now. She's a lawyer, and she'll confirm who we are." The mention of a lawyer only served to further enrage Miller. He saw it not as a statement of fact, but as a threat, a challenge to his absolute authority. "Oh, a lawyer, huh? Trying to play the smart card." Miller sneered, his face contorting with a sudden, ugly intensity. He snatched the small, empty hand that Aisha had withdrawn from her pocket. "You're resisting, and you're lying. I'm placing you under temporary detention for suspicion of theft and loitering." He reached for his handcuffs, the cold metallic clink, a terrifying sound in the suburban quiet. Imani finally spoke, her voice low but firm. "We are not resisting, officer. We are minors, and you have no probable cause to detain us. Please stop." Miller ignored her, his focus entirely on Aisha. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it with unnecessary force. "You think you're special? You think that fancy uniform makes you untouchable? You're all the same." He managed to snap one cuff onto Aisha's wrist before she cried out in pain. The sound was sharp, cutting through the air. In the brief moment of distraction, as Imani lunged forward to help her sister, Miller shoved Imani hard. She stumbled, falling to her knees on the edge of the sidewalk. The officer, regaining his balance, then roughly forced Aisha down beside her, the unfinished handcuff dangling from her wrist. "Both of you, stay right there," Miller roared, his face inches from theirs, spittle flying. He was breathing heavily, a man intoxicated by his own power. He bent down, retrieving the second cuff, and in a final, humiliating gesture, forced the twins into the position captured in the image, squatting on the ground, their school skirts hiked up, their faces a mask of fear and quiet outrage. He held the cuffs, ready to complete the arrest, savoring the moment of absolute control. The police car's lights continued to flash, a silent, rhythmic condemnation. "You've made a big mistake, officer," Aisha whispered, her voice trembling but her eyes steady. "The only mistake here is you two thinking you could get away with anything in my town," Miller retorted, a triumphant smirk spreading across his face. It was at that precise, ugly moment, the moment of his victory, that the sound of a powerful engine and the screech of expensive tires shattered the scene. A sleek, black luxury sedan, moving with an urgency that defied the neighborhood's leisurely pace, pulled up sharply behind the patrol car. The driver's side door flew open, and a figure emerged with the speed and precision of a striking viper. It was a woman in a perfectly tailored navy suit, her dark hair pulled back severely, her face a study in controlled, incandescent fury. She moved with the unmistakable authority of someone who was accustomed to commanding rooms, not running down sidewalks. She was already halfway to the officer, her eyes locked on the sight of her daughters kneeling on the pavement, and the officer's triumphant smirk was about to be wiped clean from his face. The 10 minutes of his begging were about to begin. The air crackled with a tension far sharper than the whine of the police cruiser's siren. Officer David Miller, still crouched over the two girls, felt the sudden shift in the atmosphere before he even registered the woman's presence. It was a primal sense of danger, the kind that overrides arrogance. He straightened up slowly, his hand instinctively moving from the handcuffs to the radio clipped to his shoulder, a nervous gesture of a man whose control was rapidly dissolving. The woman in the navy suit, Lena Johnson, moved with a terrifying economy of motion. Her expensive leather heels clicked once on the pavement before she stepped onto the grass, her gaze never leaving the scene of the humiliation. She was a figure of authority personified, a fact that should have been obvious to Miller, but his prejudice had blinded him. He saw only an angry black woman, another obstacle to be dismissed with a shout and a threat. "Officer," Lena's voice was low, a controlled tremor of ice. It was not a question, but a demand for an explanation. "What exactly is happening here? Why are you detaining these minors?" Miller puffed out his chest, attempting to reassert his dominance. "Ma'am, this is an active police investigation. I need you to step back immediately, or you will be charged with obstruction." He gestured vaguely toward the police car. "I suggest you return to your vehicle." Lena took another step forward, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of her daughters, Aisha's wrist red and raw where the cuff had been snapped on, Imani's face streaked with silent tears of outrage. The sight was a physical blow, transforming her professional composure into a cold, surgical fury. "I am not going anywhere," she stated, her voice rising slightly, gaining a steel edge. "These are my daughters, Aisha and Imani Johnson. I demand to know the probable cause for this detention," Miller scoffed, a sound of utter dismissal. "Your daughters are suspected of loitering and possibly casing houses for theft. They are being uncooperative. Now, for the last time, step back. I don't care who you are." "You should," Lena replied, her hand reaching into her jacket pocket. She did not produce a badge, nor a driver's license. Instead, she pulled out her phone, a sleek silver device, and with a single practiced motion, she dialed a number she knew by heart. She held the phone to her ear, her eyes locked on Miller's, a silent countdown beginning. Miller watched her, a flicker of unease finally piercing his thick shell of arrogance. He saw the quality of her suit, the expensive car, the sheer, unshakable confidence in her posture. But he dismissed it. Just another rich one trying to pull rank, he thought. They all think they're above the law. The phone connected. Lena did not waste a single second on pleasantries. "Chief Harrison," she said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable resonance of command, "this is Attorney General Lena Johnson. I am currently standing on the corner of Crestwood Drive and Kensington. Your officer, David Miller, badge number 479, has my two minor daughters, Aisha and Imani, kneeling on the sidewalk under suspicion of loitering and theft. He is refusing to release them, and is threatening me with arrest for obstruction." Miller's jaw dropped. The name Attorney General hit him like a physical shockwave. He stared at the woman, his mind scrambling to process the impossible information. The Attorney General? The highest law enforcement official in the entire state? The one who had the power to review every police policy, every internal affairs investigation, every single promotion and demotion in the entire department? Lena didn't wait for the chief's response. She pressed the speaker button on her phone and held it out, aiming the sound directly at Miller. The voice that erupted from the small device was not the chief's usual calm, measured tone, but a frantic, panicked rasp. "General." "Johnson. Ma'am, I had no idea. Officer Miller is a patrolman. The chief stammered, his voice laced with terror. "Miller, are you there? Put the phone down and step away from those girls, immediately. I am ordering you to stand down. You are to apologize to the Attorney General and her daughters right now. Do you hear me, Miller? This is a direct order." The sound of the chief's voice, raw with fear and authority, was the final devastating blow. The 10 minutes had barely begun, but the moment of revelation was complete. Miller's face, which had been flushed with anger, turned a sickly, ashen white. His eyes darted between the phone, the woman, and the two girls, who were now looking up at him with a mixture of fear and dawning vindication. The handcuffs, which he had been holding so tightly, slipped from his numb fingers and clattered onto the concrete. The realization was immediate and total. He had not just made a mistake, he had committed career suicide in the most spectacular, public, and legally damning way possible. He had racially profiled and illegally detained the daughters of the one person in the state who could, and would, end his career with a single phone call. The power dynamic had inverted with brutal speed. The hunter was now the prey. He looked at Lena Johnson, no longer seeing an angry local, but a force of nature, a cold, calculating professional who held his entire future in her perfectly manicured hand. The fear was a bitter, metallic taste in his mouth, and the first desperate, internal plea for mercy had already begun. The chief of police's frantic voice, still echoing from the small speaker of the Attorney General's phone, was the death knell for Officer David Miller's career. The 10 minutes of his downfall had entered their most brutal phase. Lena Johnson calmly ended the call, her eyes never leaving Miller's face, which was now a mask of utter devastation. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic, mocking flash of the police car's lights. "You heard the chief, Officer Miller," Lena said, her voice dropping back to that dangerous, controlled whisper. She knelt briefly to help Aisha and Imani stand, gently brushing the dirt from their expensive school skirts. The simple, maternal act was a powerful visual contrast to the officer's aggression, a silent accusation that needed no words. "You were ordered to stand down. You were ordered to apologize. You have done neither," Miller stammered, his hands shaking as he tried to retrieve the fallen handcuffs. "Ma'am, General Johnson, please. It was a misunderstanding. I thought they were older. I was just following up on a report. I didn't know who they were. I swear, I didn't know." His voice was a pathetic, reedy sound, a far cry from the aggressive roar of 10 minutes prior. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. Lena stood up, towering over him, her expression utterly devoid of sympathy. "You didn't know who they were, officer? That is precisely the problem. You saw 2 young black girls in a wealthy neighborhood, and your first immediate and only assumption was criminality. You saw a threat where there was only a child, and you saw an angry local where there was a state attorney general. Your prejudice, Officer Miller, is not a misunderstanding. It is a systemic failure, and today you are the system's reckoning." She pulled a small, official-looking notepad from her jacket and began to speak, not to Miller, but as if dictating a formal report. "False arrest, civil rights violation under color of law, excessive force against minors, conduct unbecoming an officer. And, based on your body camera footage, which I trust is recording this entire exchange, I will be adding racial profiling and perjury to that list, as your initial statement regarding a package theft was a transparent fabrication." Miller's eyes widened in horror. He had forgotten the body camera. In his rage, he had activated it, assuming it would record his justified authority. Now, it was recording his downfall, a silent, irrefutable witness to his abuse of power. The realization that his own technology had betrayed him sent a fresh wave of panic through him. "Please, General Johnson, I have a family," he pleaded, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I have a wife, 2 kids. I've been on the force for 15 years. My pension—" He took a desperate step toward her, his hands outstretched in a gesture of supplication. "Just let me apologize. I'll take a suspension. I'll take a demotion. I'll transfer to the night shift. Just please don't do this. Don't ruin my life over a mistake." This was the moment of begging for mercy. The man who had terrorized 2 children was now reduced to a sniveling wreck, his uniform suddenly looking too big for his shrunken frame. Lena's response was a chilling masterpiece of professional detachment. "Your concern for your family is noted, officer, but when you chose to terrorize mine, you forfeited the right to appeal to my mercy. Your family will be fine, They will simply have to adjust to the consequences of your choices. My daughters, however, will carry the memory of your handcuffs and your hatred for a very long time." As if on cue, a second police car, an unmarked sedan, pulled up. Out stepped Chief Harrison, his face a roadmap of stress and fury, followed by two stern-faced officers in plain clothes, internal affairs. The chief marched straight past Miller, his eyes fixed on Lena. "General Johnson, I am profoundly sorry for this incident," the chief said, his voice strained. "I have already placed Officer Miller on immediate administrative leave without pay. Internal Affairs is here to take over the scene and secure all evidence, including his body camera footage and patrol car data." He turned to Miller, his voice hardening into a final, official pronouncement. "Officer Miller, you are relieved of duty. Hand over your weapon and your badge." Miller stood frozen, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. He looked at the chief, then at the Internal Affairs officers, then back at Lena, who watched the proceedings with the cold, impartial gaze of a judge. With a trembling hand, he unholstered his sidearm, the weight of the weapon suddenly feeling immense, and placed it on the hood of his cruiser. He then slowly unclipped his badge, the polished metal reflecting the flashing blue light, and handed it to the chief. The Internal Affairs officers moved in, securing the gun and badge. One of them began to escort Miller toward the back of the unmarked car. As he passed Lena, he made one last, desperate attempt. "General Johnson, please, I'm begging you. I'll resign. I'll disappear. Just no criminal charges. I can't—" Lena cut him off with a single sharp word. "Accountability." The Internal Affairs officer gently but firmly guided Miller into the back seat. As the door closed, sealing him in the cage of his own making, the chief turned back to Lena, the unspoken question hanging in the air: "Is this enough?" The answer, written in the cold, hard set of Lena Johnson's jaw, was a resounding no. The consequences had begun, but the resolution was yet to be delivered. The unmarked sedan carrying the now former officer David Miller pulled away from the curb, its departure a silent, anticlimactic end to the spectacle. The flashing lights of the patrol car were finally extinguished, plunging the street back into the quiet dignity of the late afternoon. The entire confrontation, from the moment Lena Johnson's car screeched to a halt to the moment Miller was driven away, had lasted less than 20 minutes, but the 10 minutes of his begging had felt like an eternity. The speed of the justice was a testament to the power of the woman standing on the sidewalk. Chief Harrison approached Lena, his posture still rigid with anxiety. "General Johnson, I assure you, this department will cooperate fully with your office. Every piece of evidence, every complaint filed against Miller will be handed over. We will conduct a full, transparent internal review of our racial profiling training and protocols, effective immediately." He was speaking quickly, trying to mitigate the disaster, but Lena held up a hand, silencing him. "Chief, your cooperation is expected, not appreciated," she stated, her voice regaining a measure of warmth only when she turned to her daughter. She knelt down again, this time pulling both Aisha and Imani into a fierce, protective embrace. The twins, who had maintained their composure through the ordeal, finally allowed themselves to tremble slightly in the safety of their mother's arms. "Are you two all right? Did he hurt you?" "We're fine, Mom," Aisha whispered, her voice still shaky. "Just scared and angry." Imani, ever the more defiant, added, "He was a bully, Mom. He thought he could do anything because of his uniform." Lena held them at arm's length, looking into their eyes. "No one can do anything to you, not while I am standing, and certainly not because of a uniform. That uniform represents the law, and the law, when wielded correctly, is meant to protect you, not terrorize you. What you witnessed today was not the law. It was a man abusing his power, and you saw exactly how quickly that power can be stripped away." She turned back to Chief Harrison, her expression hardening once more. "Chief, I want the body camera footage secured and delivered to my office within the hour. I want a full list of every traffic stop, every arrest, and every complaint filed against Officer Miller for the last 5 years. And I want a public statement from your office by tomorrow morning, acknowledging the illegal detention and apologizing to my daughters. This is not a request for an internal review, Chief. This is the beginning of a systemic overhaul. I will be using this incident to set a precedent for accountability in this." The chief, defeated, simply nodded. "Yes, General, consider it done." He left, his shoulders slumped, the weight of the Attorney General's mandate heavy upon him. Lena watched him go, then took her daughters by the hand and led them toward their home, the sleek black sedan following slowly behind. The walk was a silent, powerful epilogue to the confrontation. 1 week later, the news cycle was dominated by the story. The body camera footage, secured by Lena's office and released to the public, was damning. It showed Officer Miller's aggressive demeanor, his baseless accusations, and his final, pathetic plea for mercy. The public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. In a small, sterile courtroom downtown, David Miller sat opposite his court-appointed attorney. He was no longer the arrogant officer of Crestwood, but a man facing the total collapse of his life. The charges were severe, not just the loss of his job and pension, but criminal charges for false imprisonment and official misconduct. The evidence, presented by the State Attorney General's office, Lena Johnson's office, was irrefutable. The final scene returns to Aisha and Imani. They are walking home from school again, the sun setting over the same quiet street. But this time, they walk with a quiet confidence. They see a patrol car slow down, and the officer inside simply offers a polite, professional nod before driving on. The fear is gone, replaced by a quiet strength. No, Imani said, breaking the silence. It really did only take 10 minutes. Aisha smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. 10 minutes for him to lose everything. Mom said that's the difference between justice and the system. The system is slow, but justice, when you have the right power behind it, can be instant. They reached their front door, a grand, imposing structure that symbolized the privilege their mother had earned and now wielded as a shield. As they stepped inside, the final thought lingered. The story of Officer Miller was a stark reminder that power, when abused, can be met with a greater, more righteous power, and that sometimes the only way to force accountability is to make the consequences immediate, total, and utterly unforgiving. The 10 minutes of begging were over, but the years of paying had just begun.